Hello and welcome to Juice is the New Tea. I am your host, Eleni Simos, also known as the Clean Eating Chick. Juice is the New Tea is a space where we dive into the realms of alternative health, wellness, and spirituality. With a lighthearted and curious approach, we will hear from influential thought leaders, entrepreneurs, and holistic practitioners. We will discuss ways to deepen our relationships to ourselves, explore the ways to cultivate and actually maintain healthier habits, and tried and true practices to embody our badass higher selves. And of course, the ways to manifest our deepest dreams and desires, all while keeping it real and juicy. Hey everyone, Eleni Simos here. I'm so excited, blessed, and grateful to be here with you today, bringing you the first ever episode of Juice is the New Tea, an exciting new podcast, a new project I have been wanting to bring to life for the last 6 years. So if you know me, you know I love having a microphone. Maybe I have control issues, but this is also not my first rodeo behind the mic. And this is actually not my first podcast show either. I went to college for media and communications, and it has been my dream to host and become a reality radio podcast personality. So I'm so excited to bring what has been on my vision board since 2016. So with that, I bring you Juice is the New Tea. Why is juice the new tea? Well, we all know how much I love a good, healthy juice, and I own an organic juice cleanse company called Cleansed. So I want this space, this platform, to be an opportunity to have meaningful, insightful conversations. Reframing the idea of tea and having this conversations be more about juice, more of the healthy stuff. So before going any further, I want to shout out my friend Danae for actually being the reason why I finally have the name. So I was on the phone with her and I was telling her this podcast needs to happen in the spring of 2025. And she was like, okay, she was really one of those people for me that was encouraging me to go for it. Need people like that in your life, right? So I'm on the phone and I'm like, this podcast needs to happen spring 2025, but like, I just can't figure out the name. Like, what is the name? I don't want it to be the Clean Eating Chick. I don't want it to be Cleansed. I want to start something new. I want this to feel like a new baby. So I'm having this conversation with her. It was such a creative roadblock for me. And she was cleaning her cast iron skillet, which tells you anything about the people that God has blessed me in my life. She's cleaning her cast iron skillet and she's like, oh my God, I have the name. And I'm like, what? Like it just came to her. The download came through perfectly. And she was like, it has to be Juice is the New Tea. And I'm like, Danae, like, oh my God, it was perfect. It rolled off the tongue. But like being the true Libra goddess that I am, I needed to sit with that for a little bit and just let the theme, let the name kind of marinate. What could I do with that? Juice is the new tea, right? So I shared it with my wisdom council, people closest to me that I often go to for advice. And I'm like, all right, this is the name. Like, let's full throttle. Let's go all in. So I'm really excited to bring this new chapter, this new space. And now 6 months later, here we are. We are recording our first episode live in New York City, and I'm really excited about it. So a little bit of background on who I am. As I already mentioned, the name Eleni Simos, aka the Clean Eating Chick. Have a health and wellness passion since a very young age. And I share a lot about that. So whether you know me through social media, I am a holistic health and wellness enthusiast, a yoga instructor, a Reiki practitioner, a sound healer, and the owner and founder of Cleansed Juices. So always having this curiosity of health and wellness around me. So back when I was like 14, my primary care physician at the time told me that I had scoliosis, and which is a curvature in your spine. So I was a preteen, and thank God for my mother. She was like, the primary care physician told me, we have to have surgery on your daughter. We have to put 2 metal rods in her spine. And my mom was like, absolutely not. You're not cutting open my daughter. And she took me to a acupuncturist at the time and a chiropractor and said, this is the diagnosis. They're telling me that my daughter needs surgery. What can we do? So that experience alone, being 14 and having my mom encourage herself even to go through a different route was really important. It instilled at that point something where you always should question, maybe look a little bit deeper and not go straight for boom, the extreme, but maybe just taking your time with the information that you've been given and explore alternative ways of healing before, again, like I mentioned, resorting to any extremes. So I am a curious person by nature. So some would say that that is, of course, a sign of genius when you ask a lot of questions. Or ex-boyfriends would say it's a sign of crazy. You decide. But I always ask questions. And I think that that's important, being an inquisitive person and wanting to just always dive deeper. So when I would be receiving these adjustments at the chiropractor at a young age, I'm asking these questions like when I would get acupuncture, why is the needle going in here when the problem is in my back? And really wanting to figure out how did it work? Why did it work? And then from there, I was introduced to traditional Chinese medicine, and I was just 14. So I was learning about the ideologies and the practices within that method of treatment at a really young age, which now cut to almost like 20 years later, I'm still using acupuncture for everything from hormonal imbalances to emotional health to physical injury. I resort and swear by acupuncture. It's just, we'll get into that more later on in the season. So, cut to now, I'm in my early 20s, and I had already cut out fast food. My life was changing. I was being introduced to a relatively different way of living, a healthier lifestyle. I had a regular hot yoga practice in place, and I was beginning to explore a little bit more through documentaries and books about the direct correlation between chronic illness and our daily lifestyle. Ultimately learning more about the connection of our thoughts and our daily actions for what we deal with on a day-to-day basis. So back in 2011, I was 21 at the time, and my sister and I were actually starting our own podcast network. As I mentioned, this show is not my first rodeo. We had a show called Sweet and Vicious, and we were looking for a website designer. And at that time, we ended up coming across this woman named Leanna, and she owned her own health and wellness company. So after doing a little bit of research, learning, and meeting Leanna, she had shared with me that she had cured herself of cancer. She had a tumor in her throat. And I remember being in my early 20s and hearing that. And of course, at the time, you're hearing about all these cancer diagnoses and this, disease being rampant. And then there's this woman who actually went a holistic route and cured herself naturally. So, me being the inquisitive person that I am by nature, I wanted to learn more about her experience, which opened up a whole new world for me. My passion was something that I was learning for myself, but then meeting Leanna, I'm like, okay, I have this woman here who's introducing me to juicing and all these things. So I'm like, okay, this is different. So then around that time, I was 22 and again had my own health and wellness practice in place, feeling good. My habits are changing, things are changing. And then everything came at a screeching halt for me. When I had just turned 22, my mom was diagnosed with stage 3 colon cancer. So at that point, obviously in my life, I was thrown with something that I think would have broken most people. But for me, later on now, 10 plus years later, realizing that that was the catalyst to all of this growth that I've personally experienced. So when my mom was diagnosed, the things that I was learning at the time through health and wellness, the books I was reading, the documentaries I was watching, really started to shape this, okay, let me take this experience of health and wellness, this passion that I was just using for myself, and learn more about it now because someone closest to me, my mother, her health was impacted. So there was a documentary that specifically stuck out to me back in this time frame of my life called Fat, Sick, and Nearly Dead. And I had gotten it on DVD at the time because this was before Netflix. And it was about this guy. He was from Australia, and he decided to embark on a 30-day juice cleanse. And that was even like a whole new concept for me. No one closest to me had ever been like, yeah, you can put oranges and apples and in a juicer and then drink this juice and it's filled with all of these. I was aware of it, but it wasn't something that I had really been involved in like my reality at the time. So I'm watching this documentary. This guy goes 30 days just drinking juice. He drank 6 juices per day. And I think he dropped like 40 pounds and got himself all off of his medication. He was like a borderline diabetic. I think he had high blood pressure. And the statistics were undeniable after he did this 30-day juice cleanse. So I remember that, that documentary really sticking out to me, the books I was reading. And then now my mom was diagnosed. I'm like, okay, like I need to help, whether it's through nutrition, whether it's through these things that at the time I was just learning about. Maybe this can help her. So while I was dealing with something that was devastating, it also in tandem awakened me to a whole new path um, of our food system, of our medical system, of the health risks of conventionally grown produce versus organic produce. And all of that, really changed for me when my mom had been diagnosed. So that was the first person in my life too, and even like in my friend group that had something like that happening to their parent. So of course, like as a daughter, and we're a small family, I wanted to do everything that I could to help her. So I had put myself through a year-long nutrition program where I had learned over 72 different food theories and started to not only implement for myself to just see, okay, like what worked, what felt good in my body, but then also wanting to share that with my mom as well. Thinking at the time, now obviously so much information about cancer, food, the ways that we go to treat that diagnosis has changed, and so much more information has been shared in the last 10 years. But while I was going through this pivotal moment, I realized that I had reached my dharma. I realized I had reached my purpose, and I didn't realize it at the time because I was so young and I was going through something so emotionally challenging. But I knew I had to turn this into something where I was going to learn to be able to help her. And that's really how the clean eating chick came about. I started to just, cook for myself. I was starting to juice, and then I was then watching my mom go through this really challenging time for herself with doctors and chemo and radiation, and having these conversations with her that really opened up my eyes to how broken our medical system is in this country, and how in so many ways Western medicine is behind when it comes to treating someone on a holistic mind, body, and spiritual approach. So I felt like while this, you know, challenging thing, this devastating thing was happening in my life, there was also this fire that was growing inside of me, and this like new version of me was like birthed almost through this experience. Knowing that like my mom's diagnosis was the driving force between what the next 10 plus years of my life was going to be. So there was one specific conversation I remember having with my mom and her oncologist at the time, because again, I'm thinking like we can handle this head on with nutrition, right? Not thinking about all of the other components, supplements, superfoods, other things, practices that would go into play in handling this diagnosis. But so she was on the phone with her oncologist, and I had asked her to ask her oncologist if there was anything that she should be eating or shouldn't be eating. And the oncologist blanket statement responded with, from a medical standpoint, as a cancer patient, there is nothing that's off limits to you. And I remember listening to that conversation, and my jaw, I think, like just dropped on the floor, because I'm like, wait, she didn't even ask, like, what is my mom eating? Or what's my mom's stress levels like? Or how much water are you taking? And like, I just couldn't believe that it was just a blanket statement, not even wanting to dive deeper into my mom as a person, as a woman, as a mother. Like, it was just, it didn't sit right with me. Of course, I was triggered because this was my mom, but also from like a elevated perspective, I was like, how does this make sense? So again, like it really activated something within me where I was like, I wanted to have the answers. I was learning about keto. I was learning about the blood type diet. I was learning about, how your thoughts can really influence your reality. I was learning about meditation, about yoga, about all these different systems in our body that, you know, with certain practices can really be healed and made stronger. And then there was the Western medicine component where no one was asking my mom these questions. And I was, 21, 22 at the time, like I'm like raising my hands and I'm like, wait, like, but she's not drinking enough water. Or if someone's drinking soda or eating like shit, but they have this diagnosis, like that has to go hand in hand, right? Like, but who was listening to me? Like, I'm not an MD. I just, had gone through a nutrition program, but something was activated in me, this fire where I was like, my mom is, not doing well and something's got to give. So it was through that experience, like I said, where the Clean Eating Chick was born. I really committed to cooking my own meals and having conversations with my mom, cooking for her, and really committed to leading a more intentional life that I felt, I could be proud of, that could help me prevent where I was at. So, or where, prevent what could eventually happen, cultivating positive habits and good, healthy habits. So with that, I, started the Clean Eating Chick. I started to share and create recipes and, wanted to explore more and have conversations with people. And all while my mom was going through this diagnosis. And then ultimately she passed away when I had turned 24. And I think growing through that loss, growing through that pain of being young and losing my mom, I, again, like this just complete fire was fuming inside of me. And I'm like, I need to help people around me, whether that's on a small scale, whether that's my neighbor, whether that's smiling to a stranger on the street, or whether that's creating a website, eventually building it into a brand, creating a product of organic juices to let people know that, hey, there are actually ways that we can lead healthier lives. There are ways, whether it's through the thoughts that we think, the practices that we have, the exercise classes that we do, where we can actually feel good in our bodies. And then the spiritual component of that, of like, hey, and be grateful for the experiences that we have, like reminding yourself that nothing is ever happening to you. You are not a victim here. Everything is always happening for you. As I mentioned, going through the loss of my mom really was the catalyst to this whole health and wellness journey that I began to embark on. And I was very grateful to be able to have conversations like that with my mom while she was going through her experience, where she saw a change in me as her daughter, and she saw that this passion was brewing up inside of me. And, she felt proud of me in a sense that like, hey, if this experience had to happen for me, for you to step into this purpose, like I can make peace with that. If it means that you're going to take what's happening with me and alchemize the experience to reach a larger audience and to help people, then, I'm okay with that. So a little bit of background about me and how I got into, the health and the wellness and the nutrition. And there's so much more to come, so many more conversations I'm excited to have with incredible people that I get to call friends, people that I look up to, people that I admire that are in the health and wellness industry, to have these really inspiring and motivating conversations and to bring you some juicy tea along the way, as well as mixing in some of my own experiences and ways that I can help and perspectives that I can offer to just shape, allowing for each experience that we have to be an opportunity of growth, to be an opportunity of transformation, and to be an opportunity to call in more magic and more love into your life. So with that, I give you cheers, health, wealth, happiness to Juice is the New Tea. Thank you so much. And you can follow us on Instagram at Juice is the New Tea and more for at the Clean Eating Chick. We'll see you guys next week. Juice is the New Tea is brought to you by Cleanse Juices. For more information on 3-day juice cleanses and 4 flavor packs, visit iamcleanse.com. Use code JUICEISTheNewT for 10% off all orders.